Chevy V8 powered four-wheel drives always could beat anybody up a sand dune or in a drag race. But I wouldn't say they're the great car for making a record in the length of 1,000 miles in Baja. They're going to nose into too many rocks and too many ups and downs, and they tip over they're not real pretty that way. There's a lot of things about the four-wheel drive at that time didn't fit the dynamics of today's great cars. Now they put great big tires on the back so that they come down tail first. Just the rear tires are out there holding the front end off the ground. See, those poor little Toyotas with Chevys in them were probably nose heavy. Well, they broke. And I sent Drino and John Lawler, who was a writer at Road and Track, a friend. And Drino worked in my shop. He's a great mechanic. And I said, take old shit. Old shit was all the buggies in my shop were named Old Red, Old Blue, Old Yellow. And this brown car that had been made to be a brown metallic came out of the mold terrible, and we called it old shit. And anyway, I'd taken the spare tire and set it on the hood and drew a picture around it, cut it out, set the tire in the hole on the gas tank. And I said, take old shit and go chase those guys and help them. They want to set a new record. Maybe you can help them. And it was really that, just my heart, just saying, let's have that. And the little Volkswagen helped them a lot, but it was in La Paz 10 hours ahead of them.
Wow.
That set the first four-wheel drive records. See, what does that say? It says a lot about innocence and not real smart thinking and all that, but it's okay. It's the beginning, because the beginning was full of that sort of thing, just craziness. And, the only of the 6 cars, 5 of them were Meyers Manx's. The other 6th one was a Nash Rambler. And the Nash Rambler is about as innocent as a race car as you can be. It's about as innocent as a little Volkswagen. And so what I think that came around to being was opening the door to all the dreamers in the world that thought they could be a Mario Andretti or some great race driver. But they couldn't afford to go to round tracks. They can't afford to be in Formula One racing. That's all for rich people. But off-road racing opens the door to every kid in every backyard. And there's so many dreams in the young mind that he wants to be there, that's the best part of off-road racing, is it opened the door to being an allowable way of going racing and become more than just a little backyard deal. With that huge push from Road and Track in the beginning, people are not aware of that, but the Road and Track name and had this inside knowledge of how to get things done. They were very, very successful as magazine publishers, and they gave that push to the very first stuff that we did in off-road racing. And it started it all up, and, today it's monstrous. It's fun. But what I really like about it is that it opens the door to every kid, every 18-year-old that, come on, Dad, I want to be the driver. I can go fast, because that's what 18-year-olds think they're doing. It's just a part of that time in life. So I'm very happy about that it's become a big deal. But it's become a big deal because it's affordable.
Bruce, you started this off telling us that you weren't necessarily a motorhead or interested in the Manx was art to you, and you were an artist, and you were kind of downplaying your competitive spirit and talking more about your brilliance in the art world. But here in talking, putting yourself back into it, there's clearly a competitive nature in you, and you talk about the starts. You've been involved in all these things, the beginnings of these things. And we just finished up talking about the beginning of off-road racing, but there's so much before that got you to that point. There's probably people listening right now that they would know what a Meyers Manx is if they saw it, but they don't necessarily know the story behind it. The first time I saw a Meyers Manx or the likeness of a Meyers Manx, and I'm curious if I'm assuming you're aware of this, and you may very well have had something to do with it, but the buggy that Scooby-Doo and Shaggy cruised around in Scooby-Doo was a Manx. That's to me.
That was a reflection of the Meyers Manx.
Yeah.
The Meyers Manx started a phenomena, and I can't be that wonderful, but it did. And there's wonderful words written by other editors of what the car seemed to be, but what it did was attach itself to the imaginations, and it was affordable. And I think that was the best reason. I never grew up. I'm still a little kid, aren't we all? But this guy, Bruce Meyers, held something inside of him. He used to crawl around on the floor on Sundays to read the Sunday funnies. They were in 4-color. And Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and all these guys were in these funny little cars that were too small for their bodies, but they were sticking out of them. And the wheels were great big. And there was something about that essence of the cartoon car that is a part of the Meyers Manx. There were certain things about it that it had to have, that I knew that it must have, that it must have a sense of adventure, to be clung to by those too old for adventure, but they want it. It's something that I think we all like to break rules. You know, we live by our life of rules. If you get over the double line, you're going to get killed by the other guy coming. Everything we do, you got to pay the rent, you got to open the door, everything is by rules, whether you like it or not. That's the way it is. But the Dune Buggy says thumbs its nose at convention. See, and I think it's attraction. It's subliminal. I don't think they realize what they're doing. But so many people, when you build a Manx, you wouldn't believe the number of fathers that have come to me over these 50 years to shake my hand for keeping his son out of drugs and bonding, because the kid was in the bedroom and you could smell the grass, but he'd come out and say, "Look at the bitchin' Dune Buggy, Dad," in the magazine. Dad saw what he had to do, and he went and bought a kit and an old Volkswagen. Now, 50 years ago, the Volkswagens, when you took them apart, they were fresh. The grease leaked out of their torsion bars. They weren't rusty yet. Today, it's a terrible mess. You have to rebuild everything. But in those times, Dad saw what he had to do, and the boy came, and they built the car together over a period of months or longer. Today, Dad is gone. The boy is 54 years old. That's the Dune Buggy. I'll never sell it. It's a love affair. Yeah. And Mom and the others also fell into this thing. The kid never wanted to ride to the store with Mom in the Pontiac station wagon. No, take the buggy. It's more fun. And wherever you stop with the Dune Buggy, people come. It opens conversations because it says fun. That's the biggest message. It's really quite a race car because it falls within the race car's outline. A race car has to be light, has to be powerful, has to be a certain size. And it just does all that. It happened to be that. When Don Wilcox went slalom racing with Ted Trevor, they broke all slalom racing records for 3 years on the West Coast. I mean, against Corvettes and Ferraris and Cobras, and it doesn't matter. The car was, they laughed at the car when they first saw it come in, but at the end of the day, they weren't laughing anymore. Same thing in off-road racing. See, the car had the ability to be a winner properly handled by geniuses like Ted Trevor, who was a machinist and a fabulous guy that could, we need to do this to the car, and tomorrow morning there's a car sitting there with it. He's worked all night. So we had a lot of talent that carried the message of the Manx into the world of the racing records. They went to Pikes Peak and wiped everybody out. The Pikes Peak officials says, "Get those damn Dune Buggies out of here." They did. They beat everybody. Yeah. There was 4 or 5 what they call championship cars, open wheel cars, that beat the buggies, but everything up to that point. So anyway, they have a wonderful racing record. Go ahead.
No, I was going to go back to you're talking about the father and son and the father recognizing what needed to be done and just that opportunity for father-son to bond. And I'm one of the recipients, not necessarily from the Meyers Manx side of it, but as I said earlier, I credited you with spawning an industry that ultimately created my pathway to college, and in the end, really, I mean, I make my living in the off-road racing industry and the dune buggy industry, really. and I've given you that credit. And I guess the question I have for you, and I know the answer. The question is, did you have any idea that you were starting what you started? And I think I know the answer, but then it's fun to sit here and pontificate over the fact that you just were following a passion, and then lo and behold, look what comes from it.
Yeah, great question, Ryan.
You know what I've never really given a damn about? Profit. Maybe that freed me up. I just love doing what I do. I'm a shop oriented. I'm not a management oriented. Management oriented thinks of ups and downs and profit. And everything has to have a profit or it doesn't exist as a business. And I never gave it that. I was all on to the essence of the pleasure, the artistic side. For instance, here's the artistic side. I was up at the car show at the art school in Pasadena recently, and I've got Old Red, the original Meyers Manx, and the very first car that we used to build called the SR. That's made for street roadster. They both have the same chassis, the same engines, the same wheels, the same axles, but they have different bodies. One's a sports car, one's a dune buggy. Here's a guy with a very heavy Russian accent, and he's trying to talk to me. And I said, well, a car is really two things. It's art and it's engineering. He says, no, it's all engineering. And I explained, I said, those two cars have the exact same chassis. The chassis under the sports car used to be a dune buggy. So I said, the wheels, the engine, all these things. And I pointed all that out. And I finally shut him up, and he went back and he stood and pulled his chin for about 10 minutes while I'm busy talking to others. And he keeps looking at me in half a grin. I taught him something. I changed his mind. I said, go look at the engines, and both of they're twins. Look at the wheels, look at the axles. They're all the same, the steering columns, but not the bodies. That's the art. The art is the body. You have to attract. For instance, the car is designed by guys that went to art school to be car designers. They came out, and they all wanted to be a designer of a sports car, but they didn't get to. They have to do panel trucks or something. And so working in an atmosphere of the art studio in the big factories where they come from are the designers, and it's in an art-like place. Now, there's another old man or two old guys that watch over the young guys. The young guys are full of ideas. Most of them aren't useful ideas, but the old man watches for new ideas because that's what they're trying to do, is to find something to be competitive with the other company. And so the car is designed. They have to know certain things. It has an engine in the front or the rear or the middle or whatever. It's got to be a two-door or four-door or whatever it's going to be. They know that, so they design to that end. Now the car is now created by a bunch of artists. It's handed to engineers that make it tight, doesn't leak, doesn't rattle, goes like hell, comes back out and goes back into the automotive showroom, another more artistic place. Mom and the kids like it because it's beautiful. Dad drives it, it goes like hell. He's happy with it because it's engineeringly right. So you see, it's a combination, back and forth. And most people only see it as just nuts and bolts. And the nuts and bolts are the guys, off-road racing is 99% nuts and bolts, maybe 100%, I don't know. But I see it that way. I've always seen it that way. The artistic side is what opens the door, keeps you interested. What it does mechanically, that's for the engineers to figure out. I'm not a great engineer, but I have a sense of the basics. My father, when I was a little kid, said we stopped for a train that was crossing a train trestle. And he says, when the train goes over, what's in compression, what's under tension? To a 10 or 12-year-old kid. I don't know, Dad, what? He says, well, the bottom is under tension. The top is under compression. These uprights give it the girth, the muscle. The angular ones keep it from parallelogramming. See, now he taught all me that when I was a little kid. one day he says,